question over here, perhaps?
Hey there, Andrew. Thanks for coming to Charleston, South Carolina. But my question is about, I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Louis has been known as one of the most violent cities in the United States. And this happens also in other Midwestern cities like Detroit and Cleveland as well. And here in Charleston, South Carolina, we're one of the biggest tourist cities in the United States. But you go 10 minutes north of Charleston and you get into North Charleston, it becomes one of the most violent cities in America. So what can $1,000 a month freedom dividend do to these people that are living in these neighborhoods and communities that are riveted with violence? And also, what can that do with the massive disparity of wealth that happens in cities like Charleston, where you go from Sullivan's Island, the richest zip code in South Carolina, to North Charleston or Somerville or Allendale or stuff like that?
Thank you for the question. Thank you so much. We're in the most extreme winner-take-all economy and society in our nation's history. And so the inequities you might see locally here are playing out in different areas around the country. Now, $1,000 a month is not a cure-all, but it does reduce income inequality, at least at the margins. Because $12,000 a year is a lot more meaningful if you're making $12,000 a year than if you're making $200,000 a year. Making $200,000 a year, it's like, oh, this is nice. You're making 12, then it's a game changer. Now, that does not begin to address the structural inequities or the epidemic of gun violence in this country that's racking many, many communities, particularly communities that are struggling with economic loss. So I've looked into the causes of gun violence, and I'm for common sense gun safety laws that the majority of Americans support, universal background checks and red flag laws. But I don't have the illusion that these laws are going to necessarily reduce gun violence to the level that some people would hope. Because when you think about the causes of gun violence in the communities you're talking about, first it starts at the family and in the home, and then it gets to the schools, and then it gets to our mental health infrastructure, which is completely lacking in many, many places. And then it gets to what sort of opportunities that people, particularly young men, access, because we have to face facts that 96% of the shooters we're talking about are boys and men. You know, like this is a men problem. And our schools in particular are very poorly designed to help turn boys into strong, healthy young men. It's not just the schools, but the schools are a part of it. One thing that we could do that I believe would help at the margins would be to de-emphasize standardized testing in these schools, because right now the teachers are caught in this bind where they're trying to teach the test and it's leaving kids behind. Did you all know that we invented the SAT during World War II as a means to figure out which kids not to send to the front lines? Think about how dark that is. And now we treat our kids like every year is wartime. We're like, ooh, let's like lay the wartime test on our 12-year-olds or whatever we're doing. So what happens is the kids get to school and the school feels like a bit of an assembly line. And our boys have different maturation rates. And so they're falling behind in various ways, and then they feel like, oh, school's not for me, and then they drop out, and they wind up doing things that aren't very positive, and then eventually they fall in with like a culture of violence. So it starts with the family, trying to keep families together. 2/3 of our kids' education outcomes are determined by what's going on outside of the school. So this is words read to them, and Claire and I live this every day. Words read to the kid when they're very young, parental time spent with them, stress levels in the house, type of neighborhood. You put money into the home, you actually give the kid a much better chance to learn and the teachers a much better chance to teach. So to me, let's call it like 8 or 9 steps on the path to gun violence, and you have to try and intercept each one in turn. Now that's a very, very high bar, but we don't have a choice. Like, we can't pretend that if we pass, I looked at the Santa Clarita shooting in California, like, it was not an automatic weapon, it had no criminal record, like there are very, very few, he was 16 years old, there were very, very few rules that if you'd had in place would have prevented that from happening. So you have to go very, very deep if you want to actually try and stem the tide of gun violence. Sorry, I'm passionate about this. I'm going to say something else on it. We also have to look at it and say almost 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides. I know. And so this is And most of us know that if you had a self-destruct button on your body, you would have pushed it at a moment of weakness or despair or shame or guilt. And then the moment passes and then it's fine. But if you're a gun owner in the wrong circumstance, you make that choice and it's irrevocable, and you would have regretted a moment later, but there is no coming back from it. So we have to look up and say, look, gun violence isn't just perpetrated on other people. The gun owner is often a victim, and this is tied into a lot of the causes of despair and the mental health problems in our country.
Are all y'all paying attention? Automation gonna sweep the nation unless we get him in. Andrew Yang, 2020 freedom dividend. Climate change is real again. Science rules. Teachers bringing home some bread. Medicare for every citizen. That's nice. Andrew Yang, 2020 freedom dividend.